Different on Purpose for 40 years, since 1977, independent radio, the point with the very first song that this radio station ever broadcast, Van Morrison's Caravan. And joining me in the studio, I've got the couple that started the point 40 years ago today. It's an honor to have Jeb and Susan Spaulding in this morning. Hi, guys.
Hey, Zeb,
Hello.
nice to be here.
It's awesome to have you guys in.
That first song, we started at midnight.
Right.
And a guy named Russ Kinsley, who's been he's in the Vermont
Yeah,
Hall
he's
of
still
Fame,
working. He's at one of those
Broadcasting Hall of Fame.
competing stations, yeah.
Yeah, well, hey, it's a brotherhood or a sisterhood. And the amazing thing is the song was played at midnight, as I said, and actually people called up and actually heard it, which was, wow.
Wow.
It was amazing. Midnight, first time.
And at the time that you signed on, the point was just heard in Montpelier, and since then has expanded to 7 stations in the network and online broadcasting and streaming and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only tower was in Montpelier, and the transmitter actually in in Middlesex on East Hill. But
okay.
I mean, we had listeners all over the place. Not as many as you do now, but it wasn't just Montpelier.
Okay.
It might
all
make
right.
it to East Montpelier.
Central
I just
Vermont.
meant that there was a smaller pool of people
It
to
was
be
smaller.
listening at
It was.
midnight. At
Right
midnight.
at midnight.
To catch the first song.
What were they doing?
But what a
Those
great
are the
first
old
song,
days.
you know, and the legend of that first song has lived on. I think within the first week of starting here as the station's program director 11 years ago, I was told about that being the first song. And I've always felt that the type of format that the point does and that I've always wanted to do throughout my radio career is the type of station that plays more Van Morrison and less Van Halen. That's
Right.
really the way I
Well,
looked
that
at
would be
it.
the point.
So-
and I do want to say, Zeb, that Susan and I were involved with starting the radio station. It was a group effort, though. There were a number of us that worked very hard to pull it off.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's the case for any radio station. And today, there's no one person that would get all the credit. We were talking before we went live on the air about the station's endurance. I think that a lot of credit goes to the sales staff that people don't necessarily think of as being a radio station, driving force because they're not on the air. But we can't do it without paying the bills. So.
No.
Definitely a group
And
effort.
it was really hard in the early days. Actually, our salesman David Leonard, we had one at the time, had to go around and try selling ads for a radio station that hadn't even gone on the air yet.
That does sound
That was a
challenging.
trick.
It's pretty
But
tough
actually-
already because you can't touch it, you can't smell it.
No, and actually, after a short amount of time, I mean, when we started, I did have a daily show, but recognized that we had responsibility to make sure we could meet the payroll. So I ended up going out and
hitting the street,
doing a lot of sales.
Well, you look good in a tie. You're wearing a tie right now. In fact, I'm talking to Jeb and Susan Spaulding. We think of as being the founders of the radio station, The Point, but Jeb's quick to point out it was a group effort. But it's a lot of effort to start a radio station, and this station was being started from scratch. There was no license. There was no nothing. What on earth possessed you to think that it would be a great idea to start a radio station?
Well, I mean, it's pretty simple. I hate to say it, we really liked music, and the core of the people were all ex-WRUV, UVM radio station folks, and
all right.
we all fantasized about starting a radio station. So after graduating, after Susan and I thought we were going to move to Los Angeles and be famous, and we drove as far as San Francisco and visited Artie Levine and decided that we didn't want to move to Los Angeles, came back, worked at a radio station, WBLM in Lewiston, Maine, now Portland, Maine, too.
Sure. I worked for that same company that owned
really?
the Blimp for many years. Yeah, Fuller Jeffrey. I worked for those guys out in Sacramento for a year or so.
Yeah, so then we said, well, hey, there was an unused frequency. And that's an interesting story, actually. So there was a frequency, an FM frequency in Montpelier that the owner of WSKI, which is part of the Point Network now,
right.
or whatever, the owner could have easily applied for the frequency and gotten it, but thought that FM was going nowhere. And so we applied to the FCC, and nobody else applied. So it was a long process. I mean, the regulatory process was much stricter back then.
Right, yeah.
But, I mean, we got it without having anybody apply against us, which was a miracle. And
it also helps
saved
keep
us a lot of money, too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, helps keeps the costs down a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, Susan, you told me when we were chatting on the air before we went on that you were not on the air in the early days of the radio station.
That's right. I ran the office, made sure when ads did get paid for, they got played. And it was fun. We had the first automated office in radio, which was an IBM, maybe Selectric typewriter that you could do the logs and then just fill them in. So it
With
was
the one with the
fun.
erase feature, I think I used one of those too. I probably have more power in my cell phone today
Definitely,
than in a
definitely.
giant mainframe then. But
Yeah, it's nice to see in the studio here that you have a lot of CDs. I thought everything
Thousands
was on
and
hard drive these
thousands.
days. There's still a lot of good music here.
well, there's still a lot in the hard drive too. There's thousands and thousands of songs there too. But we've got programs that are actual, the way things used to be, free-form shows like the Saturday Morning Coffee House and Crossroads.
And for listeners, you actually have albums here too, Zeb. I'm very impressed.
Oh,
I see Jimmy Spheris and Spirit and a lot of Ben Sidran and stuff that
all good
that's
stuff.
Good. I'm with you.
I'm the one that bought the Richard Harris album over there with MacArthur Park on it, but I'm not allowed to play it on the air, even though we have a functioning turntable.
Well, that's good.
But the station, we would like to think that we've kept the values of the station going from the earliest days. Maybe not exactly the same way, but we have a broad variety of music that we play. We try not to insult people's intelligence. We try not to play stuff that you're just bored to tears with. From different eras, different styles. So we're still trying to do all of that. You, though, have gone the old-fashioned route here and putting together a 3-song time capsule set for us.
Yeah, well, we thought about, okay, should we play this, that? My original show was called a Country Jazzboree. That was meant to indicate how broad it was. From
the Country Jazzboree.
In between.
I love it.
But then we thought, well, actually, one of the things that we used to do a lot that I don't hear that much anymore is like thematic sets where you'd play 3 songs that all sort of were related to the same thing, or you might take an original song that was played by a blues artist and then play covers of that one that you might not even recognize it as the same song and stuff like that. So
sure.
The set that we put together was meant to actually be all American, all before the point went on the air.
Which would be a requirement in order to get played on the first day, for example.
Right. And sort of the mindset that brought a lot of us to this area of Vermont.
All right. Well, let's let people discern the theme for themselves, but I'll give them a hint. You didn't go to Los Angeles. You came back to Vermont. Okay, it's a 3-song set put together by Jeb and Susan Spaulding for a Throwback Thursday for our 40th anniversary celebration on the Point.
A set letting us know why we like being in the central Vermont area. Finishing up with Taj Mahal, Going Up Country, Gonna Paint My Mailbox Blue. Did that version in a set that was later than the original, but still great. Before that, Steve Miller Band from Steve Miller, number 5. That was post Boz Skaggs, post Tim Davis, but a great song, Going Up Country. And of course, the beginning, Canned Heat with Blind Owl, Al Wilson doing Going to the Country.
It's independent radio, The Point. You've just been hearing the voice of Jeb Spaulding, who is, along with his wife Susan, my guests in the studio, and the very first owners of what was WNCS and has morphed into the 7 signals that are the Point Radio Network. Very nicely selected set there. I like the theme.
Well, it was just an idea to think, okay, they're all before 1977, and, we were all thrilled to be coming to the country.
Sure, absolutely, and not Los Angeles like you were talking
about. The
about.
Point is still entertaining so many people. I run into it's definitely a bigger audience. So if I'm up in Chittenden County now, which we didn't really hit in the original days, it's great to hear of the Point and see it on in stores and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's fantastic that you started the station so that we could keep it going because that's a tall order and radio is a tough business, and even though I've been doing it for my whole career, I'm not sure I would want to own a radio station. That's perhaps more nerve than I've got. So a tip of the headphones to both of you for getting this thing off the ground, and of course the rest of the team. But you guys were the first owners of the radio station.
Well, you and me, Zeb, we look better on radio than TV.
And not getting any better as time goes by. It's funny you should say that. I was just on Vermont PBS the other night. I shudder to think. My apologies to the audience. Thank you guys so much for coming in and sharing your memories of starting the radio station. And just a footnote for listeners, over the 40 years that the radio station's been in existence, because the Point got started by Jeb and Susan Spaulding back in 1977, there have been exactly 2 owners of the radio station, you guys and the station's current owner, Stephen, and we've been in exactly 2 locations, the old train station in Montpelier and now the studios that we have in Montpelier on River Road, which is kind of extraordinary, that kind of stability in radio. It's just not that common.
Independent for 40 years.
Exactly. Different on purpose for 40 years, too.
Wonder what we'll do when we grow up.
Oh, well, let's touch on that. What's your current job title?
Well, I currently have the good fortune to oversee the Vermont State Colleges system. So we're essentially the extension of the K-12 system into the post-secondary years in Vermont, which is incredibly rewarding. I
believe Chancellor.
And everything else I've done has just been wonderful. And
Doesn't Chancellor come into the title of that job?
Chancellor,
Yeah. And then before that, you were.
Well, I was the Secretary of Administration for the state and State Treasurer and State Senator for 16 years.
I don't know. It sounds like you grew up to me.
One of the founders of the Point is still something that is we're very proud of, both Susan and myself.
Well, it's been great to have you guys in. And again, thanks for starting the station. It's nice to meet you, Susan. Jeb, I've met you before. And there's a certain, we talked about the continuity of the ownership and the locations. There's also a certain continuity to the station getting started by Jeb, and now I'm working here and I'm Zeb. So
right. We started with J and we got ourselves to Z. What happens next?
Well, we'll start back around with A. Thank you guys for coming in. Mike Loam is coming up next. We got a long set of world-class rock on the way for you. It's independent radio, The Point.